My name is Winslet, and I'm 30 years old. For my 30th birthday, my family invited me to what I thought was a dinner. There were balloons taped to the wall, a cake on the table, and a gold paper banner that said, "Happy 30th, Winslet." But nobody was smiling like it was a birthday. Nobody rushed over to hug me. Nobody said, "Surprise," the way people say it when they actually want you to feel loved. Instead, almost 40 people were sitting in my parents' living room and dining room, staring at me like they had been waiting for court to begin. My sister Callie was standing near the bookshelf with her phone already raised. My mother, Denise, stood in front of the fireplace with her arms folded, her face tight and serious. And before I could even ask what was going on, she pointed at me in front of everyone and said this was an intervention. She said I was abandoning my family. She said I had become cold, selfish, and unrecognizable. Then she said, in that shaking voice she used whenever she wanted people to think she was the victim, that I was tearing the family apart. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. I just stood there with my purse still on my shoulder, looking at the untouched birthday cake behind her, and my sister's phone pointed straight at my face. And what none of them knew was that my phone was recording too. Not just that moment. The first clip on my phone had started before I even walked fully into the house. And when that first clip finally played out loud, the entire room changed. People who had been staring at me with pity suddenly stopped blinking. My mother's face went pale. My sister lowered her phone for the first time all night. That was the moment I realized silence does not always mean someone has nothing to say. Sometimes it means they already have proof. And before I take you back to how my own birthday became a public trial, if you have ever been treated like the problem for finally protecting yourself, then you'll understand why this story still sits in my chest the way it does. Drop your city and local time below, because I always like seeing where these stories reach. Subscribe if stories about quiet people finally being heard speak to you. Tap like if you already believe silence is not weakness. And turn on the notification bell so you do not miss the next story when it drops. Around here, the truth has a way of arriving exactly on time. Now let me take you back. Before that night, I was the dependable one. That was the word my family used when they wanted something from me without having to say they were asking for too much. I was 30, single, living alone in a small apartment 15 minutes from my parents' house, and working as an operations coordinator for a mid-sized healthcare company. My job was not glamorous, but I was good at it. I kept schedules straight. I tracked missing forms. I followed up when other people forgot. I knew how to make a messy situation look manageable. My family loved that skill when it benefited them. If my mother needed help comparing insurance bills, she called me. If my father, Robert, needed someone to fill out paperwork because he hated dealing with online forms, he called me. If Callie needed groceries, rent money, a ride, a late-night pep talk, or someone to calm Mom down after one of her disasters, she called me. And I answered. For years, I answered. I told myself that was what family did. I told myself I was lucky to be stable enough to help. I told myself that one day, when things were calm, they would notice I was not just a resource. I was a person. But in my family, being useful had a strange way of becoming invisible. My mother, Denise, cared deeply about how we looked from the outside. She liked people to believe we were close, loyal, respectable, the kind of family that rallied together. But inside the house, loyalty usually meant agreeing with her version of events. Callie, my younger sister, was 27 and had always been treated like life happened to her, never because of her. She could miss payments, quit jobs, ignore warnings, and somehow the conversation would become about how stressed she was. My father was not cruel. That would have almost been easier. He was quiet. He stood in doorways, rubbed the back of his neck, and let my mother speak for everyone. When things got tense, he disappeared into the garage or turned up the television. Then there was Aunt Marlene, my mother's sister, who could turn one half-heard complaint into a family-wide announcement by lunchtime. If my mother wanted a story spread, Aunt Marlene was usually the one carrying it. The latest problem had started with Callie. At first, she called it a temporary situation. Then it became a rough patch. Then it became a crisis. By the time the truth came out, she had built up almost $8,000 between a credit card, a personal loan, and unpaid bills she had been hiding. I had already helped her before, twice with rent, more than once with groceries. I had covered part of my mother's medical deductible the year before. I had sent money when Dad's hours got cut. I had done the quiet things nobody mentioned at holidays because mentioning them would ruin the story that I was just naturally responsible and everyone else was just temporarily overwhelmed. But when Callie asked me to cover the $8,000, something in me finally stopped moving. I told her I loved her, but I could not keep rescuing her from choices she refused to look at. I said it calmly. I said it privately. And I thought that would be the hard part. A week later, my mother invited me to my birthday dinner. Her voice was bright on the phone, too bright, the way it got when she wanted to pretend nothing uncomfortable had happened. She said it would be small, just family. She said I deserved to be celebrated. I wanted to believe her. That is the part that still embarrasses me a little. Even after everything, some small part of me still wanted my mother to mean it. So on the evening of my birthday, I got dressed carefully. I bought a bottle of wine on the way over. I even sat in my car outside my apartment for a minute, telling myself not to be guarded, not to bring old tension into a night that might actually be kind. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Callie. Please don't ruin tonight by making everything about money. I stared at it for a long time. I had not mentioned money. I had not texted her that day at all. The bottle of wine sat on the passenger seat beside me, wrapped in a silver gift bag, and suddenly it looked less like something I was bringing to a birthday dinner, and more like something I was carrying into a room where everyone else already knew the plan. I remember locking my apartment door, walking to my car, and feeling that quiet warning in my body that I had ignored too many times before. Something was wrong. I just did not know yet how many people had agreed to it. I drove to my parents' house, slower than I needed to. Not because I was afraid yet. Not exactly. It was more like my body had noticed something my mind was still trying to excuse. Maybe Callie was embarrassed about asking for money and did not want tension. Maybe Mom had mentioned something to her. Maybe I was reading too much into one text because I was tired. I kept giving everyone generous explanations right up until I turned onto my parents' street. There were cars everywhere. Not just my parents' driveway, not just the curb in front of the house. Cars were parked halfway down the block, squeezed in behind neighbors' mailboxes, angled awkwardly near the corner. I recognized Aunt Marlene's red SUV immediately, then my cousin Derek's truck, then 2 cars from people at my mother's church. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Mom had said small. Just family. I sat there for a few seconds with the engine running and the bottle of wine still beside me in its silver bag. The house looked normal from the outside. Porch light on, curtains open, warm yellow glow in the windows. But through the front window I could see shapes moving, too many of them, packed too close together. Then I saw Callie pass by the window with her phone in her hand. She was not texting. She was holding it upright. That was when I picked up my own phone. I did not have some dramatic plan. I did not think, this is going to save me later. I just knew I had walked into too many conversations where people later claimed they had never said what they said. So before I got out of the car, I opened a voice memo, pressed record, and slipped the phone into the side pocket of my purse with the microphone facing up. Then I carried the wine to the front door. No one answered right away after I knocked, which was strange because the house was full. I heard voices lower, like someone had passed a warning through the room. Finally, Aunt Marlene opened the door with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "There she is," she said. "Not happy birthday. Not come in. Just there she is." I stepped inside, and the first thing I noticed was the cake on the dining room table. White frosting, gold candles, my name written in looping pink letters. It should have made me smile. Instead, it looked like a prop. People were standing in little clusters, holding paper plates with nothing on them. My mother's church friend, Mrs. Ellison, glanced at me, then looked away too quickly. My cousin Derek suddenly became interested in the floor. Even my father, standing near the hallway with his hands in his pockets, would not quite meet my eyes. I had not even taken my coat off when I heard my mother's voice from the kitchen. It was low, but sharp enough to carry. Then Callie answered her. I cannot explain the feeling that went through me, except that it felt like stepping on a stair that was not there. I moved toward the dining room, slow enough that no one paid attention, and as I passed the kitchen doorway, I heard just enough. Not the whole thing. Not enough yet for anyone in that room to understand what it would become. But enough to know they were not reacting to a family crisis. They were managing a presentation. My stomach dropped so fast, I almost reached for the wall. Then Callie came out of the kitchen and froze when she saw me near the doorway. Her eyes flicked to my face, then to my purse, then back to my face. "Winslet," she said too brightly. And she lifted her phone a little higher. That tiny movement told me more than her words did. Mom came out behind her, smoothing the front of her blouse like she was about to speak at a meeting. She walked past me without hugging me, without touching my shoulder, without saying happy birthday. She went to the front of the living room and clapped her hands once. The room quieted too fast. That was the moment I understood everyone had been waiting for a cue. My mother looked around at the relatives, neighbors, and church friends gathered between the living room and dining room. Then she looked at me like she was sorry to have to be brave. She said we were not going to pretend anymore. She said this night was supposed to be about love, but love sometimes meant telling hard truths. Then she called it an intervention. The word landed in the room, and nobody looked surprised. I stood near the edge of the dining table with the wine bag still in my hand. I remember the handles digging into my fingers. I remember the smell of coffee, frosting, and somebody's perfume. I remember Callie's phone pointed at me from near the bookshelf. Aunt Marlene nodded like a witness in court. My mother said I had abandoned Callie during a crisis. She said I had refused to help when my family needed me most. She said I had become disrespectful, distant, and arrogant because I had a steady job and my own apartment. A few people shifted uncomfortably, but nobody stopped her. And the worst part was how believable she made it sound. She did not scream. She did not rant. She spoke softly, painfully, like this was breaking her heart. Like I had forced her to gather nearly 40 people on my birthday because I had left her no choice. I looked at Callie, and she stared back through the screen of her phone. That was when my mind started doing the math without permission. Callie's rent twice. Mom's deductible last fall. Groceries for Dad when his hours were cut. The paperwork I filled out because no one else wanted to deal with it. The nights Callie cried on my couch, promising she was almost back on track. And then the $8,000 I finally said no to. Apparently, that one no had erased every yes before it. My father stood by the hallway, quiet as furniture. His face was tight, and for 1 second I thought he might speak. I thought he might say, "That's not fair." I thought he might at least look at my mother and tell her to stop. Instead, he looked down. That hurt more than Aunt Marlene's nodding, more than Callie's camera, more than the strangers from church watching me like I was a cautionary tale. Because Dad knew. He knew I had helped. He knew some of what Mom was saying was not true, and still, he chose the floor. Across the room, my younger cousin Mia sat on the arm of the sofa, hands tucked under her legs, face pale. She looked at me once, quickly, with an expression I could not read at first. Not judgment, not agreement. Discomfort. She knew something about this was wrong, but she was too young, too outnumbered, or too afraid to say it. Then Mom took one more step toward me. She said boundaries were one thing, but my behavior had become concerning. She said the family had noticed I was colder lately, less compassionate, less emotionally available. She said maybe I had convinced myself that independence meant cutting people off. There it was. Not just selfish, unstable, not just unwilling. Wrong inside. I felt heat rise behind my eyes, but I did not let it move. Because I understood then what Callie was waiting for. A tear, a raised voice, one sharp sentence. Anything she could crop, post, or replay later as proof that I was exactly who they said I was. So I stayed still. I set the wine gently on the table, beside the untouched cake. Callie stepped closer with her phone, close enough that I could see my own face on her screen. And from inside my purse, my phone kept recording every word. For a few seconds after that, nobody moved. It was strange, because the room was full of people, but all I could hear was the tiny sound of Callie's phone adjusting focus and the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Then Aunt Marlene stepped in like she had been waiting for her part. She said this was not about attacking me. She said everyone loved me. She said sometimes the person causing harm was the last person willing to see it. That was when the room shifted from accusation to pressure. My mother looked relieved, like Aunt Marlene had handed her the exact bridge she needed. Mom said nobody wanted to embarrass me. She said the point of the night was accountability. She said all I needed to do was admit that I had hurt the family and agree to make things right. Make things right. I knew what that meant before she said Callie's name. Callie lowered her chin, still holding the phone up, and made her voice small. She said she had been drowning. She said she had come to me because I was the only one stable enough to help, and I had made her feel like a burden. A few people glanced at me when she said that. Not angrily, exactly. More like they were waiting for me to soften. And I almost hated myself for the fact that part of me still wanted to. Not because I believed them. I did not. But because I had been trained to treat other people's discomfort like an emergency. If Callie cried, I fixed it. If Mom got embarrassed, I smoothed it over. If Dad went quiet, I filled the silence. That night, for the first time, I let the silence stay where it was. Mom kept talking. She said $8,000 sounded like a lot until you compared it to family. She said I had the ability to help. She said refusing to help when you could afford to was not a boundary, it was punishment. That was the first moment I understood the whole shape of the night. This was not about concern. This was not about my emotional health. This was not even really about Callie learning from a mistake. This was a collection attempt with balloons. They had brought in witnesses because private guilt had stopped working. I looked around the room again and everything rearranged itself in my mind. The cake, the chairs, the relatives, the church friends, Callie's phone, Aunt Marlene's serious nodding, my mother's careful, wounded voice. They were not trying to understand me. They were trying to corner me into becoming useful again. Inside my purse, my phone kept recording. And as Mom spoke, my mind went through the things I had saved. Not because I had planned some dramatic reveal. I had saved them because in my family, reality had a way of changing after the fact. The bank transfer from when I paid Callie's rent in February. The screenshot of her asking me not to tell Mom she was behind again. The receipt from my mother's deductible payment. The grocery delivery confirmation from the week Dad's hours were cut. The texts where Callie called the debt a credit situation, not a medical emergency. The messages from Mom telling me to be a good daughter and stop making Callie feel ashamed. And one message from Dad, simple and private, thanking me for helping and asking me not to bring it up because it would upset my mother. I had not saved those things because I wanted to hurt anyone. I saved them because I was tired of being told things had not happened after I was the one who carried them. Then Mom said the sentence that finally changed something in me. She said I had never really been there when the family needed me. Not lately. Not enough. Not in the ways that mattered. I felt something inside me go very still. Not numb, not broken, just still. Because there are some lies that hurt because they are clever, and some lies that hurt because they are lazy. That one was lazy. It erased years in one breath. It took every quiet yes I had ever given and threw it away because I had finally said no once. I looked at my father again. He did not defend me. He did not even look surprised. Callie stepped a little closer. Her phone was angled upward now, catching my face, my mother behind me, the cake beside me. I could see exactly what she wanted. A clip, a version, proof that I was cruel, unstable, ungrateful. And suddenly, I was not thinking about how to survive the room. I was thinking about how to keep the room honest. I turned slightly toward Callie's phone. I asked if everyone was comfortable being recorded. That was the first time the room truly hesitated. Aunt Marlene blinked. Someone near the dining room coughed. Callie's expression flickered, but only for a second. Then she gave a little shrug and said she was recording because people needed to remember what was said. My mother nodded like that settled it. For the first time that night, I reached into my purse. Callie's eyes followed my hand. So did my mother. I took out my phone and held it where they could see the screen was still active. I said I was glad Callie had recorded. Because I had too. At first, some people seemed to think I meant I had just started recording when things got heated. I could see it in their faces. Annoyance. Confusion. A little judgment, like I had broken some rule even though my sister had been filming me from the beginning. My mother's mouth tightened. Then I told them my recording had started before I walked all the way inside. The room changed so quietly it almost scared me. Callie stopped moving. Aunt Marlene looked toward the kitchen. And my mother, who had been so composed, so wounded, so sure of her audience, suddenly lost the color in her face. Because she understood before anyone else did. The first clip was not from the intervention. It was from before they knew I was listening. I did not wait for anyone to give me permission. I tapped the first recording and let it play. At first, it was just the muffled sound of the house. Footsteps, dishes, my own keys moving in my hand as I came through the front door. Then my mother's voice came through my phone. Not the soft, wounded voice she had used in front of everyone. Her real voice. Calm, practical, annoyed. She was telling Callie that people needed to understand I had turned my back on the family. Callie said if I refused again, she could post the video and let everyone see how cold I was. Mom answered that no one needed to know how much I had already paid. Because that would only confuse the point. That was the sentence that changed the room. No one gasped. It was worse than that. They went quiet in a way that felt physical. The recording kept going just long enough for Callie to say they had to make it look like a family concern, not a money issue, because if I felt cornered privately, I would just leave. Then I stopped it. For a second, nobody spoke. My mother looked like she wanted to grab the phone out of my hand, but there were too many people watching now. Too many witnesses she had invited herself. Callie lowered her phone to her chest. I did not raise my voice. I did not call them liars. I just opened my photos and showed the things that mattered. The transfer for Callie's rent. The screenshot where she called the debt a credit card problem, not a medical emergency. The receipt from Mom's deductible. The message from Dad, thanking me for helping and asking me not to tell Mom he had said anything. I did not show everything. I did not need to. The point was not to humiliate them the way they had tried to humiliate me. The point was to put reality back in the room. My mother tried to recover. She said I was twisting things. She said families handled stress badly sometimes. She said I should not have recorded private conversations. But her voice did not carry the same weight anymore. Because everyone had just heard her admit she knew. Aunt Marlene sat down slowly, like her knees had finally remembered her age. Mrs. Ellison stared at the carpet. Someone near the hallway whispered my name, but I did not turn. Robert looked at me then. Finally. His eyes were wet, but he still did not say what needed to be said, and somehow that made everything clearer. He had not planned the knife, maybe, but he had stood there while it was handed to me. Callie tried to say she was desperate. I believed that part. But desperation did not explain the camera. It did not explain the edited video she had planned. It did not explain why my birthday had to become the place where she tried to make me pay. I picked up the wine bag from beside the untouched cake. Then I told them I would not pay Callie's debt. I would not discuss my finances with Mom again. And I would not attend any family gathering where respect was something I had to earn by being useful. Nobody stopped me when I left. That was the first consequence. Not screaming, not police, not some dramatic collapse. Just the room losing its certainty. Over the next few days, it unfolded the way real families unfold after truth gets inconvenient. 2 relatives texted awkward apologies. One cousin said he had not known the whole story. Aunt Marlene did not apologize, but she stopped posting vague quotes about loyalty. A few people defended Mom anyway. Callie left the family group chat after someone asked why she had planned to post the video. Mom tried to say I had embarrassed her, but it sounded different now. Less like authority, more like damage control. Dad called once. I let it go to voicemail. The only message I kept rereading was from Mia. It came with a birthday card she dropped at my apartment the next morning. Inside, she wrote that she was sorry she had not spoken up, and that she had known something felt wrong the second she saw Callie filming. It was not a grand rescue, but it mattered. Later that morning, I went to the grocery store and bought myself a small birthday cake. Nothing fancy, white frosting, one little candle from the baking aisle. I brought it home, set it on my kitchen table, and put my phone face down beside Mia's card. For the first time in days, it was silent. I lit the candle. I did not make a wish. I had spent too many years wishing people would love me differently, while I kept making myself easier to use. So I just blew it out. Then I cut myself a slice and ate my birthday cake in peace. And that was when I finally understood it. Being needed was never the same as being loved. And my silence that night had not been weakness. It was the sound of the truth being protected until it was ready.